So to my understanding, it's supposed to be an armadillo.
Right.
But it ends up looking exactly like whatever the other animal is.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the pilot episode of The High Ground. This is a casual, discussion-based podcast that aims to answer questions about the daily big-picture aspects of being an esports personality. At the end of this episode, I might ask if you could give us your thoughts on our questions and the flow of conversation so that we might improve for future episodes. My name is Moleman. I'm a former Dota 2 content creator as well as a massive fan, and I have been playing Dota since Warcraft 3.
Hi everyone, I'm SeekNStrike. I'm the current president here at Illini Esports, the collegiate esport program at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I'm also an amateur Dota 2 shoutcaster.
And finally, our guest for this episode is the co-owner of DotaCinema, co-founder of MoonDOTA TV, as well as the co-founder of Digital Chaos. Most importantly of all, our guest today is a diehard fan of the Phoenix Suns. Welcome to the podcast, SUNSfan.
Wow, what an introduction. Gracious me, oh my. It almost sounds like being a Suns fan is worth something these days. Good God, they are awful. Glad to be here, boys.
Okay, well, I wanted to start by asking a question that I think people might be able to relate to from a player position in terms of how you got your name. I know you have an article about this on your website at sunsfan.gg,
Yes.
But if you could reiterate a little bit for some of our listeners who might be unfamiliar with how you found your name, SUNSfan.
Oh, God. I wish the story was interesting, man. I really do, but it's such an awful story. So I started out playing Quake 2. I'm so old. So depressing, actually. So Quake 2 in 1998. That's right. I was 13, I guess, 13 years old, and I never actually had to I never had to use a 56K modem. I just had cable modem right away. That's when I started playing like multiplayer games, which back then was super rare. But I played Quake 2, like the tail end of when that was popular, and then transitioned to Half-Life and whatnot. In we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, but I am notoriously terrible at coming up with nicknames or just names in general. MoonDOTA MoonDOTA wasn't my idea, but I do love that name. So that might be the exception.
Oh, MoonDOTA is... When we were talking about names for our show, MoonDOTA came up as like, see what they did, you know?
Dude, the hippo is so iconic, you know? It's
exactly.
a great logo.
It's memorable.
But anywho, my first name was White Trash. Now, there's no real reason behind it. I used to joke that I lived in a trailer with a satellite modem. That was... I don't know why I thought that was funny, but that was my joke back in the day. And then I transitioned into, again, I don't even honestly remember the meaning behind it, but Pakistani Rambo was my next name.
Okay.
And I played a very large majority of my Counter-Strike career under that name, and I used that. It was like my channel name when I was casting Han. And then at a certain point, people would ask me, I'm not even Pakistani. I'm half Middle Eastern, but not Pakistani. So I had like no connection almost. And I'm thinking to myself, like, since I'm getting into casting and whatnot, I need to change my name to something that people can relate to. Obviously, I'm terrible at coming up with names. What am I passionate about? What is never, ever going to change? What am I never going to regret making my name? So since I'm a Suns fan, it was pretty easy to come up with. And obviously, in my mind, I'm like, oh, people from Phoenix or Arizona will appreciate this and understand that, hey, I'm also from Arizona. Maybe we can get the gaming community going. That didn't work at all because even people that live in Phoenix have no idea what it means until I explain it. But it ended up sticking, and that's the god-awful story behind my name.
How often is SUNSfan taken? Like, how often do you have to make a name like SUNSfan03?
Yeah, it depends. Like in games, not often actually, because there's not that many Suns fans in the world apparently. But yeah, if I'm on like ESPN type thing, there's no way I'm gonna get that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You're an exclusive bunch.
Yeah, for sure.
So you said you started playing Quake in the Counter-Strike. I was a Counter-Strike fellow myself way back in the day, but how'd you get involved in Dota? Like, when did you start picking it up? Did you start during Warcraft 3? Did you just get right into Dota 2? Or how'd you get involved?
Yeah, so I played Counter-Strike forever, like literally the beginning, 1999, Beta 1, as old school as you could possibly get, unless you played in the Alpha, I suppose. And for many reasons, Counter-Strike and Dota are they're kind of connected in some way. That's what I've always said. They feel like, even though they're completely different genres, they cater to the same type of people a lot of the time, right? Like everybody that played Counter-Strike would play Dota back in the day, and that I was no exception. Of course, I played Warcraft 3 first, before the mod came out, and then played Dota for 4.5 years, and then eventually I was like, I was really excited for League of Legends, actually, believe it or not. But when they were first announced, I'm like, wow, this sounds good. This is everything I want. It's basically Dota on a new engine that isn't good, because Warcraft 3 engine at that point was super outdated. It was complete garbage.
Oh, yeah.
But then somebody gave me a key for Han, and I played it, and I think to this day, that first year, that is the best game I've ever played in my entire life to date.
Wow.
For sure. It was because IceFrog obviously was involved in certain capacity. But yeah, I played League of Legends like 6 months into my Han career, if you want to call it that, and I was like, this is one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. It was like the art style I hated. None of the heroes were like actually Dota related. I mean, maybe a little bit, but nothing was a port. So Han was, for a good year, was absolutely amazing. Then it went downhill fast.
Generally, when you play Dota, do you have a go-to hero? Do you have someone that you always go to?
It changes so often. I know everybody's probably thinking Centaur. It's definitely not the case.
I was thinking Phoenix.
Oh, I mean, from a name standpoint, maybe. From a hero standpoint, my God, that's like a support. Ugh, if I was forced to play support, I would just not play Dota. I literally would rather not play Dota than play support. But I have been told I'm quite a selfish player. But I don't know. It changes. That's the thing. Like, I'm not one of those guys that can just spam a hero. Maybe a little bit now and then, but there's no way I can spam, like, even like after 3 games in a row, I'm like, I have to switch heroes.
So how did you get involved into like content creation and like becoming kind of a little bit of a caster / personality? I know you mentioned that you started off casting in Han, but was that just a natural transition to Dota? Like, could you elaborate a little bit about that?
So at a certain point in my life, I was kind of at a crossroads. I don't want to call it a midlife crisis because I was like 24 or something like that. I was going to graduate school and I really hated it. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm just going to go all out and try to do something in the esports, because that's always been my dream, is to do something I'm passionate about, which is gaming. And I just never knew what specific job I would want to do, right? Because at a certain point in Counter-Strike, I'm like, all right, it's not realistic. Like, because I was professional at Counter-Strike for a while, but this is like before being professional even mattered, right? You wouldn't make any money anyway.
Right.
So at a certain point in Counter-Strike, I'm like, all right, I'm over the hill. Even though I guess technically there's some older players now, but I thought I was over the hill, kind of washed up playing Counter-Strike Source. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to quit school. I was only like half a semester in, so it's not like it was super expensive to just cancel it all out. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to play Han, and I'm going to try casting, because I don't think there's enough casting, and I think it could be fun. I've been told an okay voice, even though I can't stand listening to myself. So I started doing a little bit of casting with Reeves and Xenocide as kind of like a tri-cast. And we started to get pretty popular, kind of like a niche following, I guess you could call it, a cult following. And then Dota 2 came out, and I'm like, obviously I'm going to switch to this at some point, but wasn't sure when it would be, just because the game was absolutely awful. Like the first month or two it was out, like the netcode was horrendous. I actually made a video. IceFrog asked somebody, then they asked me to make a video showing the difference between not just turn rates, but just netcode in general. A lot of the differences between Han, like just engine related stuff.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that got fixed, and that's when I started to get much more hardcore into Dota 2. But I was a part of Game Replays, which is, a non-paid volunteer casting group for Han, and they were opening a Dota 2 section, and this guy named Neil was looking for a voice for his channel called DotaCinema, which had been out already. It existed for like a month already. And I tried out, and he liked me, and that's pretty much it. That's how the content creation started, I guess.
And the rest is history.
Something like that. I mean, a lot of it, I'm a very self-deprecating person, and I've actually been working on not doing that as much, because back then I'm like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. This is all luck. I've never been so lucky in my life, because the channel blew up and all that stuff. But part of it, like part of being successful in esports, since it's not like you can go to school for it specifically, right? It's just kind of one of those things that it's kind of on the job learning type of deal.
Exactly.
If you put yourself in position to get lucky, that's the important thing. And then once you get that, taking advantage of it. And I feel like I did a decent job at that with Neil's help, obviously.
When did you get your beta key for Dota? What was that like?
It was pretty ridiculous, actually, because I had just joined DotaCinema, so it was a very new thing. Actually, it's a funny story, because August of 2011 is when TI1 was, and I was away on work. I just had like some contract job doing some boring ass shit, and I was gonna be late to watch it. So what I did was I came home early, and the only flight available was first class. And at that time, I didn't really make much money, so it was a lot of money for me. Fly first class, got sick because I ate way too many peanuts because they don't stop serving you peanuts. It's like an endless fucking thing, you know? You have to take advantage. Like, I've never been in first class before. This is great.
When you're in first class, they give you access to the peanut fountain.
Yeah, they give you access to everything. Like, good lord.
Splurge a little.
And I get home, and I actually get there in time to watch TI1, and it was very exciting. Obviously, a little bit disappointing because the games were pretty trash. It was always Anti-Mage versus Spectre, and a lot of the games were like directed camera. So anytime there's a Tinker in the game, it just follows him everywhere he TPs. It's like, this is unwatchable almost. But yeah, a month later we get our keys. Like Ice Frog himself supplied them. And I'm like, and then he ended up adding me on Skype, and I'm like, holy this is fucking
really
wow. I was like, there's only a few people in my life. Like I'm a Suns fan, right? NBA fan,
right?
Like running into somebody on TV. I mean, players are very intimidating, but at the same time, these are like 7-foot black guys, right? You're going to be intimidated regardless. But these NBA players are very intimidating, and like it's a scary situation almost. Not scary in a bad way, but just like very exciting. And the only people I felt like that for in esports is Day 9, the first time I met him, which is way back when. Gabe Newell, and then even though I haven't actually met him, Ice Frog online. Like talking to Ice Frog online,
that's a terrifying sensation.
It is.
You know, I was recounting to SeekNStrike right before this. I've had the exact same feeling with Gabe Newell.
Oh yeah,
believe it or not, in person. I was in the Valve building. I was going to go for visiting for a tour. And I said, you know, which building is it? They all have the same address. He walks straight past me when I'm down there trying to figure out which building it is. And I just stared at him. I didn't even say anything.
Yeah, that's kind of my experience. And it's funny because, like, the first time I met him, he was like, oh, we watch Fails of the Week. And I'm like, what? Like, there's no way that's true. There's no way that's true. And then the next year, I introduced myself again, thinking he wouldn't remember. He's like, I remember you. Like, okay, well. And then the next year, I just didn't say anything because I'm still too scared. It's weird. It's really weird.
Gabe is such a nice guy when you...
yeah, for sure.
Especially over email. I've had a couple email conversations with Gabe Newell.
Are you sure it was Gabe, though?
I wished him a happy birthday, and he told me, thank you, Lucas. First name basis with
Nice.
Gabe Newell. When it comes to DotaCinema, which series, which kind of show on the channel was the most interesting or inspiring to produce for you?
Top plays, I think. Well, first... You have to remember back in the day. Do you remember WoDota?
Oh yeah, of course.
So obviously WoDota was just like they were the highlight people for Dota 1, and they tried making their foray into Dota 2. And originally there wasn't a replay system. So the literally the hour that it was announced that there's going to be a replay system, we got on with some of our video editors, and we got an announcement going out. Hey, send your top plays to this blah blah blah. We got all the logistics figured out. And that was like crucial for the success of the channel in general. I mean, because of that, we essentially beat WoDota.
How exactly did you envision competition with WoDota for that? Because WoDota was definitely they were the top of the top. I mean, I watched WoDota.
Yeah, I think honestly the hardest part was picking a song. Everybody liked that.
We Are Electric.
Yeah, We Are Electric. And in hindsight, it's hilarious because I think the first 3 episodes we had different songs for each. And then we stuck with the current one that we have for like the 4th and beyond. And that was like an executive decision to not change songs anymore and just have like an iconic one, which definitely worked out. But it's funny because I was obviously very worried that competing with WoDota is going to be very difficult because they're the originals. Apparently they didn't pay anybody, so it wasn't that hard after all. It didn't actually matter too much because they just don't pay any of the editors. I'm like, how do you even exist?
Like, really?
It's really weird.
So once you reached that point, and you were starting to, expand into new content, and obviously at some points you're going to put out some content that's not so well received, some that are well received. But what was that like getting the projects that didn't quite get the reception you were looking for? Like, what was the mentality, and how could you recover from that the next day?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of different avenues I can go down with this. First, I guess, is just accepting criticism. Like, you have to understand, my name is Shannon, right? And I grew up in the United States, so I have pretty freaking thick skin as it is, right? But still, it still gets to you. People raging, being racist, and all this other stuff in comments. Like I barely even read YouTube comments anymore. And then there's another avenue or another aspect where, like, let's say we're making a guide. It takes so much time to make a guide, and then it gets like 1/5 the views of your other stuff, and it's like, is this even worth doing? So that's kind of why we stopped doing guides. But yeah, like taking criticism, I'm trying to think of any shows that just miserably failed. I'm sure there were a few. Nobody really remembers those at the end of the day.
Well, on a personal level, actually, part of the inspiration for the show was the weekly update that you guys used to have on DotaCinema. That was you, Reeves, a guest, and usually that was Cyborg Matt or Purge, and you guys would just sit down and talk about the new patches, the new heroes, or whatever it is that was coming out at the time.
Yeah, I think we would literally just scroll through Cyborg Matt's blog, right?
Yeah.
Half the work was done for us. Yeah, I mean, that was a little bit ghetto. I mean, honestly, I enjoy that kind of stuff. It's just, it's very difficult to, and maybe it's part of my deficiencies as a person. I hate scheduling stuff. Like, if something is scheduled for me, I'll show up. But if I'm the one in charge of it, it's never happening,
Oh, yeah.
So that was part of the issue. And that, like, What the Horse is one of my favorite series that it's too hard to do and doesn't get that many views. And it's also very difficult to schedule.
You mentioned that you guys would talk about new heroes. I guess, has Ice Frog reached out to you for the Sobek files yet? And when is he coming out?
All right, so here's the hilarious thing. The concept was easy because I made that years prior for Han. So here's this. Okay, I'm gonna sound very bitter, which there's definitely some truth to that. Okay. So this hero concept, I came out like 2 years prior to that video. Let's say maybe 3 years before. And Han took one of the abilities, which is his W, which is like this shield that you put on a hero and it shares damage between the two. That was essentially taken because I publicly posted about it, and they just took the idea and didn't give me credit, of course. And they put it in a hero called Martyr. He might have changed a lot since then. And the passive of Sobek became Huskar's passive. It was before Huskar's passive. Of course, they changed it a bit to give him, I think at the time when it originally came out, Huskar, like the lower you got, the higher your magic armor became, but also you get more damage, I think, at a certain point. And now it's attack speed. But mine is just magic armor, and it's a ton of it. And then I actually made another hero, which, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but
go ahead.
A hero that was based off of like water.
A water spirit.
So if you're in, I can't remember all the specifics, but if you're in the river, for example, you're very fast. You have like some stats upgrade. I don't know, something. You're way better in water. And then you're able to create water temporarily on land. That was taken and put on Han as well.
So is it for certain that whatever this new hero is going to be the water spirit or the air spirit?
No idea. Well, the air spirit is apparently just going to be the new hero that's coming out, the butterfly-looking one. Because they were basing it off of like it's Sylph, right? Or Self, I can't remember the name.
It's Sylph.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the new hero. So I think that debunks the whole any spirit kind of thing.
What do you think? I mean, you were spectating while they released some of these ideas. What do you think about the two new heroes in terms of their design? What we know about them so far?
Well, nobody knows how they're designed. Well, that's not true. I know one of the heroes, all of his abilities, but I can't really say.
Understood.
That hero sounds really cool, and it's going to introduce a new mechanic that I've been personally waiting for since the Han days. So super excited about that. And you have to keep in mind, like for modding, even though modding is kind of ignored right now to some degree by Valve, being able, like if they put a certain new mechanic in the game, that means they can start using that mechanic for new heroes. So it opens up a lot of new possibilities. And then the butterfly self-hero, whatever the name is, it sounds like a real shit show, but might have been changed a lot since then. I don't know any of the abilities though. I just heard it's a shit show.
Can you confirm what kind of animal the Puss in Boots is?
See, that's the thing. Okay, what is it's the armadillo, and what's the other one called? What is it?
It's some sort of bizarre armadillo cat mixture.
So to my understanding, it's supposed to be an armadillo.
Right.
But it ends up looking exactly like whatever the other animal is.
Just pulled it up. It's called a pangolin.
A pangolin.
Yeah, the reason I have trouble remembering is because Slacks always mispronounces. He always calls it pangolin or something. But yeah, he sounds pretty cool.
I suppose that's a good transition into Moonduck then.
Yeah. Well, a little bit about Moonduck. What exactly inspired the creation of the agency? I know I've spoken to a few personalities, and they seem to say that the work that they do just seems right for the place or the time that they're in. What exactly inspired the creation of the company?
I feel like when I tell this story, it's going to make me sound more bitter, which very well may be the case. So part of the reason that I started MoonDOTA, like I started the discussion with Zyori and Synderen, the first two I talked to, is because I was pissed. And I don't like being pushed around by people that think they can take advantage of anybody. So this is pre-TI5. I was casting DAC. I think that was probably my peak as a caster, as far as being like accepted into the scene as a caster, not just like a personality. I thought it went really well. And then I had really nothing else to cast because I wasn't a part of any studio or anything like that. And then TI qualifiers come around, and I'm invited to go to Sweden. The way that it was set up, which I'm definitely going to sound bitter here because I 100% disagree with the way this was set up, and I'm not going to name names, but the specific people behind it. They invited all this talent, like AC, me, Cinder, like literally everybody, right? Just TI Hub. And then I looked at the schedule for casting. This is like literally 5 hours before my flight. I look at the schedule for casting, and certain people have like 12 to 13 series that they're casting. I'm casting like 6, which is probably like the average. And then certain people are casting 1 or 2. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this actually doesn't make any sense. Like, it literally just angered me. Like, I was super pissed. And it's not even about me either because I get the average amount. It's like whatever at that point, right? And then I voice my displeasure, and at the end of the day, it was just a difference of opinion on how hubs should be run. So my opinion is it's kind of like qualifiers for TI. You have all these teams, aka talent, invited, and they all get an equal chance to prove themselves to be invited to TI itself. I think that's the entire spirit behind any hub, and I will disagree vehemently with anybody that tries to counter that. The other opinion, and this is only like a couple people, the people that are just like in charge of scheduling, they think that the work that you've done throughout the entire year warrants how much you should be casting during TI, the TI hub, which I, again, 100% disagree with. It completely negates the entire purpose of the hub. So because of that, I boycotted it. And at the same time, I asked Valve, would this affect me being invited to TI as talent? They said, no, it would not. And I still wasn't invited. And of course, I'll never know if that actually mattered or not, right?
So do you feel like MoonDOTA was the right thing to do?
I mean, at the end of the day, it probably hurts me more than anything, which in hindsight, it's like sometimes I just need to be more selfish, you know, and not try to stick up for other people. But I think because I did that, it helped alleviate a little bit of the issues at the hub. At least that's what I'm told. For example, AC was going across literally the entire world, from like California, wherever he lived, to Sweden, casting 1 series.
Right.
Like, that's fucked up. You're there for like 8 days. You're trying to get to TI. Like, Valve is basing, I assume, like a decent amount of what the invites are actually be based on the hub itself. And you're giving him 1 fucking series. That's a joke. That was my opinion on that. All right, rant over. Sorry.
For the listeners that may not be aware, would you just mind elaborating a little bit on what MoonDOTA is and kind of what it's created for? And now that we know why.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of it's something we started with a bunch of guys like Purge, Synderen, Zyori, Pimpmunkle, and a couple others. Eventually Slacks. It's just like a group of friends that just want to, you know, do things the right way as far as casting is concerned. We want to have fun with it. It's definitely a more laid-back style than what people are used to, and it's a good way to bring new talent into the fray as well. So just as an example, like Trent Pax is one of my favorite guys in the scene, and he started as like a stats guy. You know, he started from almost nothing and then worked his way up, and we noticed him, brought him on, and he's flourished big time. I think he's an amazing talent. Another example, we ran Caster's Crucible during the TI qualifiers this year, which was essentially just a separate stream where amateur casters could just cast the games, and there was an MMR rating attached to them that the viewers could manipulate. So if they really liked them, they can upvote them, essentially. And the guy that was the first to do really well, he got like 7,000 plus MMR, was Bren. He's joining MoonDOTA as well. It's kind of a mix of just friends having fun, you know, doing things the right way, at least how we see it, plus bringing new talent into the scene instead of getting the same old people at every event.
So you talked a little bit how it's changed a bit since the past 5 years. I wanted to bring up an old quote of yours. This is from an interview.
Oh,
Ooh, where is the interview? It was with Team, I hope I don't pronounce this right, Team Dignitas, just before TI2. You were quoted as saying that Dota, in all likelihood, will not be as big as StarCraft 2, and the game has at least a 5-year span. We were trying to pull up some definite numbers, but I think it's fairly safe to say that this TI was probably one of the most viewed esports events in the entire industry, definitely more than StarCraft.
I said that about StarCraft?
Yes, you did.
Really? Wait, Brood War or StarCraft 2?
The quote is StarCraft 2.
I said StarCraft 2. Okay, I was an idiot then. That game was garbage. That game went nowhere.
So I guess that leads me to my question. Like, what do you think's changed since then? I guess maybe it looks like you get smarted up a bit, but what else has changed in the Dota scene that you've seen, and why do you think it's still continuing very strong to this day?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that like the players that play, or even from a casual standpoint or watch, they're very invested, more so than other games, because you have to put in more to actually understand it, right? The learning curve and whatnot, which is, it's a double-edged sword at the end of the day, but and that's exciting part is like the lifespan of Dota. I said 5 years back then. It's definitely more. This is like a lifetime thing. The engine was updated, so it's going to be good for the next 10 years or so before they come out with the Dota 3 or something like that. Valve is very obviously dedicated to the game because it makes so much freaking money for them. And then I think the thing that differentiates Dota from every other game is Ice Frog. The guy is a literal god. Like, there's nobody better at balancing. He's not that he's perfect by any means, but he's just attached to this game. So let's just say, theoretically, Valve and him part ways, or they want to do a different game and he wants to make a Dota 3 or something like that. He can just do his own thing, and people will follow him. It'll be like the same thing.
Ice Frog is our benevolent god.
He really is.
A little bit onto the development of Digital Chaos. What exactly pushed you over the edge from content creation to not just management, but team ownership, going and making your own team?
As a sports fan, it's one of those dreams that you have where you're like, I want to be the GM of the Suns. That would be a dream job. And the closest thing you can find from an esports perspective is to be an owner, even though honestly, it's not nearly the same because you don't really have control over your roster, who change. You can't trade players. There's no, like, the free agency is a clusterfuck to say the least. But it's still something I wanted to pursue because it was just a dream. And, with the experience, obviously I'm not with them anymore, but the experience overall was definitely a learning one. Opened my eyes to a lot of new things that I wasn't aware of. A lot of pitfalls as well, and made me understand better managing personalities, for sure, like egos and people with leadership roles. Like, here's an example: like when a team is announced, like through this free agency period, if you want to call it that, after TI, a team is put together. I feel very confident looking at and I know everybody feels this way about themselves. Trust me, I know that. But I feel like because of my experience, I have a better understanding. When you look at these players on paper, I'm like, this team is not going to work out. There's no fucking way. And I think that's the biggest downfall for players is they let their ego get in the way. Like, oh, I want to play with this guy, this guy, this guy. And on paper, just from a skill standpoint, you're like, wow, this is a great team. But knowing what you know about personalities and how a leader, depending on how the leader of the team works and egos clashing, like there's a couple teams I'm like, there is 0% chance. Even though they look great on paper, there's 0% chance that team's going to work out.
This will work out together, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, so if it ended up, like right now, obviously the players have 90% of the power as far as the way the pendulum swings right now, and the teams not so much. Just as an example, if I had autonomy, if I had complete autonomy on the roster of a team, I'd make an amazing roster because the team would mesh. They'd have good chemistry, and that's by far the most important aspect of a team.
Do you imagine esports management moving a little bit more into the realm of how it works in traditional sports in the future?
Not real. I mean, maybe to some degree. Like for League and other games, it's more organization-centric, and then Dota is 100% player-centric. So from Dota's perspective, no. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I don't think you just don't have enough control over your team. Like one day your team looks great, the next day somebody gets mad and they just leave the team, or somebody poaches them from you. Like you can have them under contract, but not a lot of teams force that upon their players because that precedent hasn't really been set. Poaching of players is very real. Like if you have a bigger org that just happens to have a little bit more money at that time. So yeah, there's a lot of variables obviously, but for Dota, I don't see that really changing. And I think, I'm not saying Valve's way of doing things is incorrect. I mean, the way I look at it is League is one side of the spectrum, Valve and Dota 2 is the other side, and I feel like a balance between the two probably would be good. Both are kind of on their own ends of the extreme level, I think.
What is it like a little bit traveling with a professional team?
It has its highs and lows. I mean, for obviously TI was a kind of a blur for TI6 because we did so well, and that was the only tournament I think we ever did well at because we just bombed every other tournament. It's great to get to know the players on a more personal level, and I mean, obviously it depends from player to player how much they respect you as a person, as a businessman, as their owner, and how much advice they actually want. You kind of have to play that by ear. Like some players want you to help them with certain stuff. Other players want they don't want the org to have their hands in anything, which I can respect that on some level. But going to actual events, I mean, it's fun. It's cool to see them succeed. And then when they fail, or if they fail, I should say, try to bring them back up. So I definitely made a lot of friends going to these events with them.
Could you elaborate a little bit? I know obviously the season's changed now since we said there's majors and minors every weekend. But last season it was more of there's the three really, really big majors, I guess TI included there, and then a bunch of smaller ones throughout. So could you take us through maybe an average, an off week where it was just maybe practices or scrims, and what was that like for a person in your position?
It was nice. I could wake up well, first of all, we obviously had a manager, and they would schedule all the scrims, and I would just wake up at 11 a.m. or noon, since I'm a late sleeper, put on my wireless headphones and just hop in a scrim, listen to the team play on TeamSpeak, and that's easily the most fun out of everything that I did as an owner, by far. We were talking prior to this recording about how FPL is so cool because you can listen to the players, and I completely agree. That is the coolest experience I've had, is listening to players. Of course, it's a little bit more serious when they're scrimming, but you get to listen to strategies, and even though you don't know nearly as much as them, it's fun to go back and forth about what's good or what's bad in a certain game. That was the most rewarding experience for me, I think.
I know SeekNStrike here is a dedicated fan. He was in the bleachers for you guys at TI6.
Oh, nice.
I was one of those guys yelling DC back at all the Wings fans.
Nice.
It was wild.
Yeah, I was stuck in the locker rooms the whole time. I think I watched 2 games in the crowd just to get the experience. That was very cool, but the locker room just blows. You literally don't hear the crowd at all. It's pretty crazy, actually.
Do you have a particular favorite experience from esports in general, from traveling or from working with players, working with other personalities? Do you have one that sticks out in your mind?
We recently, this will kind of give you perspective on both sides here. Recently went to Galaxy Battles. Have you guys ever heard of that tournament by any chance?
Galaxy Battles?
I don't think so. No, not personally.
I'm totally unfamiliar.
That's not a surprise, let me tell you. But this was prior to TI, this latest TI. MolemanDOTA went to China, and we cast a tournament. And the actual tournament was just a complete shit show. Nothing worked. Even through the grand finals, people were not able to fully watch the stream, whether it's audio issues, video issues, stream going down, all that stuff. WCA is the worst tournament I've ever been to. Not even close. Galaxy Battles would be a next step up from that. So that's number 2. But At the same time, I haven't had more fun at a tournament because obviously we don't take ourselves too seriously, and just hanging around the MolemanDOTA people in a completely, not just a different country, but China. That's a different universe, right? Nobody speaks English.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, the first time I went to China was for WCA, and that was in Yinchuan, and that I would probably never go. I shouldn't say never, depending on pay, but I would probably never go back because the city is in the middle of nowhere. It's a very Muslim-centric area, which I lived in the Middle East for 10 years, and I know what it's like to live in, I lived in Saudi Arabia, so that's pretty much as hardcore as you can get. And this was like that, but in China. My girlfriend and I, they didn't want us to room together because we weren't married, just as an example. And they would threaten us with religious police type stuff. And then they put the hotel in literally the middle of nowhere. Super nice hotel, terrible food, but super nice hotel. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want the talent or Westerners to leave the hotel because there's nowhere to go. They don't want them to get lost or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg for that tournament. That was a complete shit show. But the difference between that and Galaxy Battles is we were in Shenzhen, and even though the travel there and back and the actual tournament itself were complete garbage, every other part of the trip was great. Just hanging out with the guys, walking down. It's really cool to just experience different cultures. Actually getting to use my Google Translate, my girlfriend was telling me new features that were added, you can literally put your camera up to text and it changes it on the screen. And I'm like,
in real time.
That is fucking insane.
In terms of the future of esports and the future of Dota, how much bigger do you think esports are going to get?
I would say esports is going to get huge. I think the Overwatch, have you guys heard about this Overwatch league where teams are paying like literal millions of dollars to get spots and all this other stuff?
A little bit, yeah.
I think that's a disaster. I think there's no way that's going to work. It reminds me of, you guys are probably too young for this, but there was a tournament series called CGS. It was mainly Counter-Strike. It was sponsored by DirecTV. It was like the first real mainstream attempt to get esports on that same playing field as TV.
I think I do remember it, actually.
Yeah, it was actually just horrible. It was like, it was Counter-Strike. Like, you'd have brand new franchises that would draft players, and it was Counter-Strike, like FIFA, fighting game, like a bunch of games, and each one would have like a point system associated. So in a match, like this team versus this team, A versus B, you'd have like the FIFA players play each other and they get certain points, and you have the Counter-Strike teams play each other. Interesting concept, doesn't work in practice for many reasons, one of which is I think at that time it was too early, probably. Number two, you don't have like proper casters. That's something that they definitely undervalued. You'd have like, for Counter-Strike as an example, you had DJ Wheat and Fatality doing casting. I love those guys. Fatality, looked up to him a lot as a first-person shooter. DJ Wheat still doing a great job as host and stuff for Twitch. They're not Counter-Strike players. Like, if you go on any Counter-Strike stream, the announcers are amazing now. They're so far beyond what it used to be. But that was a huge disaster, and it kind of set back esports, I think, in a lot of ways, like making non-endemic sponsors kind of weary of getting into this scene. Like, now they're kind of doing that. It's not exactly the same thing, obviously, but Overwatch, you're putting millions of dollars, and I don't think the game is good. Like, from an esports perspective, I don't think it's good at all. I've been wrong before. I thought League was horrible.
Yeah.
So I've definitely been wrong before. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but it's pretty risky, and I think it would definitely hurt esports if it's not a success. So I'm for sure rooting for it.
No, as a dedicated Team Fortress 2 player, I have to agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, TF2 is a whole nother story. I won't go off on that tangent. I was very disappointed when TF2 came out because they had been hyping it for 8 years and they remade it 3 times.
Oh, yeah.
And the original concept I thought was amazing because it was supposed to be Battlefield 2, basically, or just Battlefield. But anyway,
well, you've seen the original concept art for it, right?
Oh yeah. I was super excited. I would go to school. I was in high school at that time. Like, I would literally print out pictures and like, I can't wait for this game, guys. TF2's gonna be so good. And then they come out with like a cartoony thing. I'm not like, it's probably fine. It's just I wasn't expecting it, so it definitely turned me off. But back to the esports thing. I think the Overwatch thing could definitely hurt esports as a whole. But, long term, esports is going to just get bigger. It's going to overtake everything. The one main negative of esports is that it's divided into tons of different games, right? Like, you can't say, like, esports is not, like, when you're comparing stuff, esports is not the same as basketball because each game is its own sport. That's the way you have to look at it. Counter-Strike is basketball. Baseball is League. Hockey is Dota, whatever the case may be. That's the thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand. And the other thing people from the outside don't seem to understand is right now, of course, you have these older generations that don't want to watch this stuff. And they're like, oh, it's not a sport, blah, blah, blah. People that are in our scene don't care about that. We don't want it to be a sport. It's its own thing. That's fine. It's the TV companies that want, like, there's a reason ESPN wants to get into esports because that's all the young people. Like, there's a certain point where TV is just going to die if they don't do anything.
Right.
So I think it's inevitable that esports is going to get bigger and bigger. I don't know about Dota specifically or League or any of these games, but at some point in our lifetime, for sure, a game, like one specific game, is going to be bigger than a major sport, like NBA or NHL or whatever. Don't think we're there yet.
Even recently, like the 76ers bought Team Dignitas, right? For
yes.
Even like Magic Johnson owns a certain stake in Team Liquid.
Yeah. Did you like Magic's tweet after TI? He said, "Congratulations to Team Liquid for winning T17." I couldn't stop laughing when I read that.
He was close.
That was pretty god tier. But yeah, like, there's a certain point where one of these esport games will be bigger than an actual sport. We're not there yet. Like, esports as a whole, all of it combined is definitely bigger than any other sport, and it's just going to grow. Now, Dota specifically, with Artifact being, developed, I think it's just going to extend the lifetime of this game. It's much longer lifespan than I thought, that's for sure. I'm not complaining about it. It's my livelihood. So
What do you envision for Artifact?
what do I envision? Well, I've been told a lot of what it's
slippery,
like, so I
yeah.
don't know what I can actually say.
You don't have to say anything in particular that's incriminating, but just in general, what do you imagine for the future? What do you imagine when you think of a Dota card game?
I think, well, on a certain level, I'm afraid because I know, like, I definitely want to make content for it. I'm not really a card game player. I play a little bit of Hearthstone. I watch a lot of it, I will admit. But that's not really an esport. This is going to be like hardcore, to my understanding at least. It's going to be the Dota version of card games, right? So it's going to be hard. It's going to be much more complicated than a normal one, which scares me.
So I guess earlier you spoke about like the ups and downs that it all has, and of course, not everything can be as easy as it always seems. So I think maybe kind of a wrap-up question here is like, what keeps you coming back? Like you have a rough day, but in the morning you wake up, like what are you thinking? Like what keeps you coming back to the scene and creating content or casting or just doing what you do?
Well, on some level, this is all the money I make, right? So
True, yeah.
From a living standpoint, I know I have to, but I've never really been a huge money guy. Brand new projects, some of which I can't announce right now, but I have so much work to do. It's almost overwhelming how much work. Like you guys use Trello? It's like an organizing type app, I guess you can call it, where you list all the stuff, like to-do lists almost.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
It's just like, this enormous list of stuff that I have to do. So on some level it's overwhelming, but on another level it's like, wow, this is exciting. This hasn't been done before. Looking forward to what the reception's going to be like. And, it's all about helping extend the lifespan of the game, help esports grow video by video or content by content. And yeah, I am definitely a happy camper.
Excellent. And then I guess since you did mention a list, are we going to get an updated Ags list coming soon, or?
Oh God, probably. nobody liked that fucking list. That for the amount of time that took, that did not get the reception I was hoping. That's for sure. And I think at the end of the day, it's not like I'm not. Like, I made this entire stipulation, like the preface to the article, like, hey, I'm not an actual expert. You can probably justify everything being in a different position just because everybody's going to have a completely different mindset as to what makes a good Ags, right? People just I can't have fun, If I make something fun, people don't like it. It's just like with fails. If Slacks and I make an intro that we think is hilarious, pretty much every time the reaction is, this sucks dicks. So I just gotta make it more mainstream, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for us.
SUNSfan, thank you very much for joining us for this episode.
No problem.
We did forget to ask, is there anywhere people can find you? Twitter, Facebook, Tinder? You on that already?
Oh, Tinder. I've never. I don't think I've ever actually seen Tinder before. I've heard a lot about it.
It's an experience.
I know a lot of players like Tinder. That's for sure. Swiping left and right and whatnot. Just SUNSfan TV everywhere.
All right.
Twitter, Facebook, Discord, SUNSfan.
One last question. Has anybody ever recognized you by voice?
Yes.
What happens?
So obviously when I'm at TI, it's a different story, right? Because everybody's a Dota fan, so a lot of people know me. But when I'm just walking around outside here, there's been... Of course, I don't go outside very often, as to my pale complexion, which is
don't we all?
And my vitamin D deficiency, of course.
Not an IRL Suns fan.
Yeah, I've been recognized like 4 times maybe in Arizona. One of which was it was a video. What was it? The Video Games Live concert where they play like video game music, and one of which was Dota. So I definitely wanted to attend. And somebody just heard my voice and recognized me. So that was pretty cool. I feel like I don't have that iconic of a voice, so.
Oh no! When I think of hero introductions or anything like that, it just pops straight into my head.
I don't know if that's a good. Slacks makes fun of me all the time for talking so slowly. I'm like, I don't know what to do, dude.
Oh no, it's useful. I mean, if you talk slowly, listen to Purge patch analysis.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, SUNSfan.
No worries. Thank you, guys.
And for our listeners who are still listening this long, this is a pilot episode. We are looking for feedback. So if you have any feedback you think would be relevant to us, you can leave a comment in our Reddit thread, or you can PM me directly, MolemanDOTA. You could also PM SeekNStrike, or you could leave a timestamped comment in our SoundCloud link. Thank you very much, everybody. We look forward to releasing our next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just been pushed off of the high ground.